I haven't played too many games on the Sega Dreamcast. There are a lot of really great ones, and many of those are arcade ports. WWF Royal Rumble falls into that, where it's a port of an arcade game. This was an exclusive Dreamcast game. Ukes were the developers. They also did the Smackdown games. And yeah, both versions, the arcade and the Dreamcast port, were released in the year 2000. I wanted to start with this game because it was different from all the other wrestling games that I have played. There weren't any other versions of this on home console, so hey, this should be something different, and hopefully it's something good. Never played this one before, but let's just see what it has to offer, and hopefully it's good. Like many arcade ports, there's no story for this game, which is kind of a step backwards. It's a little disappointing, but it's kind of understandable. They didn't want to spend more time on this arcade port than they really had to. Yeah, it is what it is. There are only 2 game modes with this, and that makes it feel kind of like a spiritual sequel to the WrestleMania the arcade game or WWF In Your House. You can play an exhibition match, or you can do the Royal Rumble. The exhibition match is a little odd because it's a gauntlet, and you choose 2 wrestlers. You need the second wrestler to occasionally come in and act as, like your interference guy. It's sort of a weird control mechanic. I don't really like it too much, and I didn't use it all that often. But it is interesting that it's there, so hey, that's kinda cool. So these interference moves, for lack of a better word, they can be done as often as you want, but they do need to recharge in between uses. So, yeah, it's nice. One thing that I was really confused by is when people just run down the ring, and yeah, it's very odd. There are 2 ways to win matches in the exhibition mode. You can either win by knockout or by pinfall. This is fine for an arcade game. In the Royal Rumble, you just toss everybody out, and that's pretty much it. It's a very shallow experience. The roster is pretty weak when you compare it to the other WWF games in the year 2000. There are only 19 wrestlers, and then there's 1 secret wrestler that you can unlock. This isn't bad for an arcade game, but when you compare it to the other home consoles, it is pretty weak. The controls are great. You can tell that this was from the developers of Smackdown because everything's just really easy to do. If you're familiar with the controls from those games, this shouldn't be a problem for you. It's really easy to learn. The special moves are very easy to do, which is just great. There is a manual available online. You probably won't need it, but it is helpful if you want to know some of the controls before you start and don't feel like learning them as you go. Thankfully, I had a complete copy, so I didn't really need that, but you can find it online if you want. Overall, the gameplay is pretty good, but there just isn't much to it. There aren't enough game modes for, really a console game. If this was released in 1995 or 96, it would have been amazing. Unfortunately, it was released in 2000, and yeah, there are better options out there than this. But if you were looking for something on the Dreamcast, this was probably your best option because the others are just rehashes of the Acclaim games. I did have a few issues with just lining up my character at times, so the targeting was a little weird, especially when somebody runs into the ring. But overall, it wasn't that big of a deal. It is a solid game, and I do like the gameplay quite a bit. This is one of the best looking wrestling games that I've played so far. The ring, the wrestlers, the entrances, they all look amazing. It doesn't make up for the lack of gameplay, but at least it looks really good. Seeing how good this game looks makes me wish the Smackdown games had been brought to the Dreamcast. This is very far ahead of what the other games released in the year 2000 were. They're on par with what the Smackdown games were. It just looks really, really good, especially when I compared it to the other games released on the Dreamcast. Those don't look anywhere near as good as this one. Every so often, you would just kind of get teleported backstage. It was a little strange. I really wasn't totally sure what happened with that, but at least the areas that you were in, they look pretty good. The cutscenes for the double team moves look great. All of the moves look good. The animations are great. And yeah, it's just an overall excellent looking game. Some of the minor things looked a bit off. There were things where you would see in other wrestling games from like the late 90s and early 2000s. But overall, the animations look really good. You might have a problem with like clipping or something like that, but it really didn't come up too often. This is just a really beautiful looking game, and yeah, it's kind of sad that there wasn't more to it. I only really looked at 3 reviews for this game. Most of the reviews put it between like the 4 and the 7 range. There was one review that I really want to highlight because I just find it so strange. Like it's really funny that it even exists. So I'll be looking at GameSpot, GamePro, and Maxim for this. I can't believe that the Maxim review even exists. It's really more of just a press release that than anything else. They do talk about it, but it's a very short little blurb about the game. For those that don't know, Maxim is a men's magazine that shows photos of women who aren't wearing a whole lot, like swimsuits or lingerie. They decided that WWF Royal Rumble was an 8 out of 10, so yeah, that's fun. There really isn't much to it. It's just a very short one, and yeah, it's just really baffling to me that this review even exists, and I kind of want to know how many other games they wrote little articles like this on, because it's really funny that it's there. So now on to the 2 serious reviews. Both GameSpot and GamePro, they gave the game pretty similar to each other. GameSpot had it at a 6.5 out of 10. GamePro was a 3.5 out of 5. So pretty much the same. GameSpot said the game isn't bad, it's just too different from the other wrestling games on the market, basically because it's an arcade port and there just isn't a whole lot there. Most of the publications just echoed what GameSpot said. Strangely, there were better wrestling games released on the Dreamcast, but they were all only released in Japan. IGN pointed that one out when I looked at their review, and it kind of made me wish that we had gotten some of those, because it would have been way better to review some of those games instead of what we got on the Dreamcast. We kind of got hosed in North America. So the controls are great, the graphics are wonderful, there's just not a whole lot of gameplay here. It's a very shallow experience. It feels like one of the arcade ports that you would have seen back in the mid-90s. There's just not a whole lot here, which is really disappointing because the game is quite a bit of fun, but after like a half an hour or so, you're out of things to do. This is a pretty average game. I feel basically the same about this as I did with the other arcade games that were released. It looks better than those, and the gameplay is better than those, but they were released in like the mid-90s. This one is in 2000, so yeah. I was a little disappointed by it, even though I did have fun with this. Anyway, that's going to wrap things up. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.